Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live and direct for another new Film Fanatic video. It's been quite a journey. It's been a blast. I've been doing reviews on my favorite franchise, and I've done reviews for this wonderful franchise. I've done multiple shows on them already. There's at least probably two shows where I cover each movie. Basically, there's two reviews of each movie that I believe exist on the channel. It was one Friday the 13th is my favorite franchise, and I believe I started to do. It was funny when I first started doing the YouTube channel, and I got further into it. There were suddenly tons of movies I wanted to talk about, and I like to kind of move on to the next thing. Most of the again about 98% of the videos I do are about are movies that I actually own in my own collection. And so I don't, I don't stream movies. I love the tactile, physical media horror. So all of the movies that I own, I want to talk about. And as I was progressing and doing this channel more, there were franchises that I wanted to explore. And then I thought, well, maybe that's too much. It's going to be kind of never ending. When you think of some of the franchises that exist, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, Hellraiser franchises, the Howling franchise, uh, the Godfather, Saw, the Saw franchise, the Purge franchise. There's so many. Friday the 13th, and of course Halloween. I felt, well, maybe that's going to be too much or too daunting. But I started to do, then I was like, well, let's just try it. And I started to dive into the idea of really doing it. And I believe the first franchise that I covered, in its fully realized thing was the Friday the 13th franchise. Did all the movies. I bought a really awesome. It's probably my favorite collection out of all of the movies that I own, and that is the Friday the 13th box set. There are other upgrades. I got this probably about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Watched it multiple times, and I love this because it comes with. I mean, not only you get to see all of these movies, completely remastered, and beautiful Blu-ray. The quality is amazing. There's a lot of cool special features on each movie, which is really great. Because I've seen that before, where they'll have these big combo packs or a bunch of movies that are a part of a franchise, and there's not necessarily any special features on them. But now with 4K and now there's even more of a popularity around these movies. A lot of them get re-released or reissued for in multiple times, and it's a little bit crazy to keep up with that. As a collector and as a fan, I don't I and it ends up happening, and it's a thing that happens to anybody who's collecting movies, and I where you end up having multiple copies for one film. Like, for instance, for me, I have about five different versions of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of my all-time favorite movies. That's just one example, and I have multiple copies of other films too. And I know since this box set's been out actually for a long time, it's got pretty much all of the movies that were that came out through the 80s and the 90s and early 2000 ish period, or 90s. It's and again, it's got tons of special features, and it's pretty good. It's a lot of cool interviews. There's some really cool interviews with the director, Sean Cunningham, of the first one, and Victor Miller, who also wrote wrote the first film, and these guys both basically launched this whole franchise. And you don't really see, especially Sean Cunningham. He never does, interviews. He doesn't do the convention thing. He's a pretty private guy, and he does talk about this movie obviously because it's made him millions and millions of dollars. But compared to anybody else tied to the franchise, he kind of just does his own thing, and he's a very talented director. I love some of his other films that he's not really known for, but so it's got its bonuses. And I know since I bought this set, there's been quite a few other editions that have come out, and I'm pretty happy with this one. So I don't know if I'm gonna buy another box set. I think there's two others that have come out, so we'll see. But it's been a blast, and I've been revisiting these movies again and watching them for the millionth time again, and I never get sick of them. It's always exciting and fresh, and I do for what they are. Like, they're easy movies to really digest. Like, they go down pretty quick. But I find myself noticing things about the films that I didn't really notice too much before. I'm gonna start talking about as things start wrapping up here with covering these movies. You know, I'll talk about more around the the actors who have played Jason. Ted White being my favorite. One thing that's occurred to me too since I've been watching a lot of these films again, I always liked Kane Hodder. Kane Hodder played Jason in about three movies, and he's the only, I believe, the only actor to play Jason multiple times. I, in all honesty, I never really liked Kane Hodder. Well, I shouldn't say that. That might be a little bit harsh, but I never was a huge fan. I never thought like, I don't know. It always like I always felt it was a little bit. I always felt he was a little bit overly hyped as Jason Voorhees, and he's known because he's played three movies and he's very prolific. He's done all kinds of movies, and he's got this really kind of intense personality. And he's done he does conventions. He's very out in the public. I always kind of felt he's good, but I always felt like maybe his you know he's a little bit overrated as far as his characterization as Jason. I've always been and still am a Ted White guy who played Jason in the only movie that he played Jason in was the final chapter, which is a masterpiece. So it's funny, but I will say one big thing has shifted for me, and I will eventually talk about more of these things. And again, this is because I'm getting new things out of watching these movies, and these are movies that I've seen so many times. Again, I just finished up the box set. The last movie I watched is Jason Goes to Hell. I'm going to do a big show on that. That movie is just incredible. But I've also gone through the three movies that Kane Hodder played Jason in again, and I found myself really, really loving his portrayal of Jason, and I have him at the top of the list. I have a whole new found respect for Kane Hodder. I had heard about this documentary about his life, and I started watching it the other night, and it's kind of jaw dropping, and it gave me a whole different perspective on Kane Hodder, a whole new appreciation for him as an artist and as a personality, and again, just from the Friday 13th perspective, I've found myself really, really enjoying his portrayal. It's some of the best performances ever, and I kind of feel like his whole, getting that badge of being the Jason Voorhees, I kind of feel is pretty accurate. So I will be talking more about that when I get into the films that he was in. So Not quite there yet, but we're getting there. One other thing too is, which is funny because Halloween is very close, a couple of weeks away. I see it a lot. People are doing their lists on YouTube as far as like the top 5 or top 10 horror films to watch. But for me, it's like I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. But I watch horror films all year round, so it's never a different kind of thing or a different mindset. So it's always kind of funny. I remember a YouTube guy that I really love, Mood616, had commented saying, "I don't need to do that. I watch horror movies all the time." And it's like, it's just funny. But today's show is on a movie that, speaking of things that have shifted for you and changed, today's movie is on Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, part 6, I believe. Came out in 1986. I have really distinct memories of actually seeing this movie in the theater, and I was about 10 years old. I think this might have been the only Friday the 13th that I can remember seeing in the theater. Every other movie that I saw was on VHS or on cable, like late night horror shows back in the day. But definitely VHS, without a doubt. That was like Friday 13th with this was a regular thing in my diet, and it well obviously it still is. But I do remember seeing this movie in '86. And to be honest, I always thought this movie was good. I always thought it was solid. I never thought it was great. It's very different from the rest of the films, but I always thought it was good. I always had an appreciation for it, but it was never, you know, it was always secondary for me as far as like the top tier list of all of these films. I never really appreciated it so much. But then about about a year ago, I watched it again and I was just like, "Whoa, this movie is so awesome." And I there's a really great interview with the director of this film, and there is some really great special features again in this whole collection. And I it was directed by Tom McLaughlin, and I again had this revelation. I really felt this movie was easily one of the best movies in the franchise, and it's a very different film. It's got a whole different kind of tone. I feel like this movie has a lot of different influences from other genres and horror that we have not seen in this series. This movie, I feel too, the big thing, and I got it from watching the interviews on the special features portion of this disc. But they were talking about Tom McLaughlin was talking about the influence of the Universal monsters, the classic Universal monsters that we all know and love. Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Jr. The iconic monsters, kind of the monsters that started it all. They were they're the kind of the bedrock or the blueprint for monster cinema. I'm more of a werewolf guy personally, but I love I love Frankenstein and obviously Dracula, and the biggest genre I feel the most popular is definitely the vampire genre. There is a new werewolf movie that looks pretty awesome that I'm kind of excited about, which we don't get enough of. But in this interview for the special features, Tom McLaughlin was talking about how they he really was inspired by like the classic Gothic Universal monsters. And this film, Jason Lives, really has that kind of aesthetic. Like it feels like Jason Voorhees in this movie is really portrayed as a monster. For like there, you can see it's got this really gothic vibe to it, which is great, like an old school gothic tale. The cinematography is amazing. There's also a lot of humor in this movie, which is very very different because a lot of all the movies are pretty silly and goofy, but this one has a little bit of an extra comedic thing to it. It can be looked at almost as like a black comedy. Like there's like a little bit of like almost like a slapstick thing to it. But it's beautifully shot and it definitely delivers as far as it being a horror movie. But Jason's portrayal or Jason's way of operating is very much in that vein of like the classic Universal monsters. You could see influences of like Frankenstein and also Dracula in this film, and it's definitely more his portrayal and his characterization in this movie and the way they kind of shape his character, Jason Voorhees. It's definitely more of a monster movie, and it's beautifully shot. The cinematography for this movie is just incredible, and this movie has grown for me to where I thought it was okay. I thought it was good. I thought it was solid for many many years. Now this is one of my favorite movies. I love this movie. I think this movie is, I mentioned it before. I really feel like these movies, are pretty good at kind of being standalone movies. You can watch these movies out of succession. And I think this movie is a prime time example of that because it really is a great, the action and it's a movie too. When you put it in, you're like right away excited and you're pulled into the story and what's happening. Truly great movie. The director is also talking about the idea of being able to watch this movie in black and white. And again, it's referencing the classic Universal monsters, which of course were all in black and white. And I was like, wow, like that would be awesome to get this on Blu-ray or 4K, in black and white. Like that would be amazing because that's the feel of this movie. Great, it's got great kills. Again, really great kills, and great comedic moments, but just great atmosphere. The atmosphere for this movie is so spectacular. And again, at the end of the day, I've talked about that many times. For me, if the movie's got atmosphere and I kind of get lost in that world, the world building, even if the direction's not very good, the acting is kind of sucky, or the writing's not great, I'll probably love that movie. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't, I have, obviously I love film. I watch movies all the time. I have my very strong opinions. I take unpopular stances sometimes with movies, you know, and but that's okay, and I'm glad people have their opinions. But I don't really require a lot to enjoy a film. And to me it's really about, I can look at the biggest piece of trash film, but if it's got this kind of rawness to it, and again an atmosphere, and I'm kind of pulled into it, and it's entertaining, I will probably love that film. It's a case of so bad it's good, that happens. But this movie is actually really well done, and I think from a technical standpoint, it might be the best movie that there is. It's really, really well directed. So, and it's still got the schlocky element, of course. But yeah, Jason Lives, killer, killer movie. I That kind of got me back into watching the franchise again the past couple of weeks because I was thinking about watching it again, and then I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna watch it. So I came home one day and started watching Jason Lives, and I'm like, yep, this movie is the cat's meow. This movie rules. And then I'm like, well, got to do it. Start it all over again. So then I started from the top, tippity top, and I started watching the franchise again. Now I'm all the way deep into it. Now I'm going to be watching Jason X. So, yeah, just awesome. So, thanks again. And I want to thank, too, before I forget, there's been a lot of folks who have been commenting on this channel, or on the videos on this channel, and I've gotten some nice new subscribers. I really appreciate that. It's great finding some other maniacs out there who have the same tastes, and or who are just open-minded to different films. Just give you an example. Like, again, I've been two shows that I did that have been getting comments quite a bit. I did a show on Invasion of the Blood Farmers, which is this super uber low budget piece of trash from 1972, which I fucking love. It's such a great exploitation movie. It's a great, just a great horror exploitation movie. And I discovered that for the first time, and did a show on that. And that's been getting some cool hits and some good feedback. And then that week I also did a show on the Kevin Costner movie Horizon, which is a western. So, and that is you look at both of those movies, they are as different as you can possibly imagine. So that's just kind of sums up my taste in film. And again, I gravitate towards these films, the low budget horror exploitation movies. That's my shit. That's my jam. But that's my base. But I love film. I love all kinds of movies. So I love, I'm not the best YouTube guy on the channel. I feel like I'm learning still. This is still a new kind of thing for me. It's a new experiment. I've had the channel for over a year. So I used to do just Facebook videos, Facebook Live videos, but the channel is new. So I'm learning about it, and there's still a lot to learn. I really, really enjoy it. It's something I look forward to doing all the time. And I'm trying to get things curated a little bit better. I sometimes ramble on a little too much, but the reason I kind of keep it really loose is I just try to talk about how, you know, my life and art, music that I write, music that I play, how it's all interconnected for me with film, and how that is such a, well, really the biggest influence for me, especially with my group Quantum. So I try to talk about all those things, and I know sometimes that can be maybe looked at as off topic or off subject, but for me it's directly related. So I understand that, but I really appreciate you know, people who have been supporting this channel. And the one thing I think that I will say I'm really proud of with this channel is those two examples of, because I don't really feel like you're going to find a channel in the YouTube universe that's going to cover those two movies, Invasion of the Blood Farmers, and then in the same week Kevin Costner's Horizon's going to drop a review for that film. I can't say you're going to find that anywhere. So I think I have, the one thing I think I have over other YouTube people is I have more variety. Again, I mostly do exploitation movies, but I try to mix things up. So that's one thing I do say I take pride in. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.